From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I'm Carla Gonzalez, and this is From the South. Leaders from over 20 Latin American and Caribbean countries are in Cuba to discuss issues affecting the whole region, including sustainable development and inequality. The United Nations Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, the ECLAC, are holding 5 days of talks in Havana. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said in his speech at the opening ceremony of the session that increasing inequality has become the face of globalization, and so new tools should be found in order to break that vicious pattern.
Inequality makes it harder for people to enjoy better healthcare, education, and access to justice. These inequalities also make it harder for people to earn a decent salary and to live with dignity. For over a generation, the income of the richest in the world, the 1% of the population, has increased twice as much. Compared to the poorest 50%, inequality has become the face of globalization.
Also at the opening ceremony, Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel, who we saw with Guterres, called for the abolition of what he called the inequality culture, a culture that imperialism and neoliberal policies have promoted for decades and that prevent Latin America and the Caribbean from fully developing. Díaz-Canel also highlighted the need to maintain and expand global agreements such as the Paris Accords to fight against global warming, a threat which Caribbean countries are particularly vulnerable to. The UN Secretary General said the next climate summit that will be held in New York will be in September 2019.
It is necessary to transform the inequality culture linked to the colonial past of our nations, which particularly affects indigenous people, Afro-descendants, girls, and women. It is also, in our opinion, a consequence of imperialist and neoliberal economic policies that for decades have benefited transnational companies and strengthened difference due to class and race, and between territories, and between urban and rural populations. The Paris Accords begin a path for all of us to fight against climate change, which affects everyone, but especially the Caribbean countries, where this threat is much bigger and puts us at risk. We need special measures to protect our economy, and at the same time, more cooperation, more solidarity and development.
And delegates to this meeting will also attend a forum in the Convention Palace in Havana, where leaders will present a new development plan for the region.
Sana, the Executive Secretary of the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, or ECLAC, said that they will support Cuba during its own sovereign road of development. During the first day of this session's period, the Commission recognized the value of the Cuban Revolution for the articulation of economic and social development policies, in spite of limitations caused by the U.S. blockades.
Each year, we are the ones who prepare everything for the Secretary General to present the costs of the blockade against Cuba. This has been so important that almost every country, except one or two, are against the blockade that has been so terrible and unfair for Cuba's society.
Some experts think that the commercial war in Havana waged by the U.S. administration brings a difficult overall picture for the Cuban economy. They say that in the last 3 years, the disappearance of progressive governments has caused an increase in unemployment, poverty, and debt with international financial institutions.
I think that neoliberalism has shown us again how efficient it is at producing poverty. This only forces us to keep fighting. There is no other way. We must awaken our people again to defend their rights and to improve the economy.
Those who attended the ECLAC forum also spoke about the necessity for Southern cooperation for development. They talked about international cooperation projects in Cuba for health, culture and education, as ways to create a new kind of economic relationship for future development.
There is not a poor country that doesn't have something to share, nor a rich country that doesn't need the knowledge of another. What we need is to make people understand that. I think Cuba is an example of this for everything it has done for global education.
Many nations also defended multilateralism and cooperation not defined by the United States.
Now to Venezuela, where Samuel Moncada, Venezuela's ambassador to the United Nations, said that the United States will fail in their attempt to insult Latin America. His comments come in response to U.S. Vice President Mike Pence, who has urged leaders to impose sanctions on Venezuela until President Nicolás Maduro leaves office. Moncada recalled Article 20 of the OAS Charter, where any kind of foreign pressure is forbidden. He also accused the U.S. government of extortion, threatening the region and humiliating its members. Moncada called on Latin American governments to respond with dignity and reject threats of foreign intervention.
Today, the Vice President of the United States comes here to commit an international crime, violating the OAS and UN charters. And people applaud him, and he even says he does it in the name of God. I want to respond to the US Vice President, who represents the most racist and intolerant government of this continent in the last decades. The most aggressive and humiliating in the region. It's hard to remember a president that has insulted the region so much. President Trump has used the most denigrating words to refer to member countries of this organization. I won't repeat those insults here, but he's done it, and you all know it.
A statement published by Venezuela's foreign ministry has confirmed the country is resigning its membership to the Organization of American States. The decision came after U.S. Vice President Mike Pence attacked the country during a speech at the OAS and urged leaders to impose sanctions on Venezuela until President Maduro leaves office. Earlier, we spoke with our correspondent in Caracas, Ian Bruce, who told us about the reactions to these remarks by Pence and also of Maduro's call for a national dialogue.
Harsh words from the U.S. Vice President Mike Pence against Venezuela at the Organization of American States. No surprise there. He called on the Bolivarian government to suspend the elections on the 20th of May. That's in spite of the fact that clearly many opposition supporters in Venezuela want to vote on the 20th of May, and also in spite of the fact that many thousands of Venezuelans took part in that rehearsal on Sunday, and they clearly trust their electoral system. The government's response has been quite muted, apart from that response from the ambassador Samuel Moncada, which we heard earlier. President Maduro, for example, at a campaign event yesterday, made a general reference to the aggressive attitude of the United States, but didn't mention Mike Pence. What he did concentrate on, and this is in a way the government's response, was his call for a new broad national dialogue as soon as and when he wins those elections on the 20th of May. He said he wants to include all of the opposition in this new dialogue, and he said he's already spoken to the president of the Dominican Republic, Danilo Medina, for him to host those talks. Now, this is quite ambitious because you will recall that at the beginning of February, the government and the traditional opposition parties came very, very close to an agreement in Santo Domingo. Everybody thought they were about to sign. We were told they were about to sign, and at the last minute, the opposition decided it wouldn't sign the agreement which had been drawn up. The government alleged that they'd received a phone call from the United States which told them not to sign the agreement. So an attempt to restart that dialogue certainly won't be easy, but Maduro said he's prepared to go do whatever it takes to bring and secure peace in Venezuela.
On Monday, President Nicolás Maduro spoke at a campaign rally at the Poliedro of Caracas. He talked about the importance of strengthening the public education system and warned about the right-wing's plan to privatize it.
El futuro de la educación pública. The future of a public education, free and of high quality in the country. The right-wing, oligarchical, pro-imperialist, proposes to surrender the country to the International Monetary Fund. And the International Monetary Fund's first task, when it enters a country, is to eliminate public education, to privatize education.
A delegation from Canada will travel to Venezuela next week to act as international observers for the May 20th elections. We spoke with Donald Foreman of the Canadian Union of Postal Workers on the upcoming electoral observation.
Well, for the labor movement in Canada, we believe in international solidarity, and the union I belong to and many other unions are involved with many countries around the world when it comes to international solidarity. So our connection is with the workers in Venezuela. When we're there, we'll be meeting with workers in Venezuela prior to the elections. And that way we can report back to our workers what's really happening on the ground in Venezuela. Once we're there, we'll be meeting with other trade unions in Venezuela, and we'll be, asking them questions on the transparency and the fairness of the elections. We'll also be taking a close look at the elections, the voter turnout, the freedom of the press in Venezuela, and the actual sort of polling station and how voting is done. It wasn't long ago that we all read the glowing review from the Carter Institution calling Venezuela some of the best elections held anywhere in the world. All of a sudden, for some strange reason, we have the West now saying that the elections aren't legitimate. And we need a fair and honest reporting back to Canadian workers as to the actual system that's taking place there.
Police in Brazil have confirmed that student and LGBTI activist Mateus Passarelli was killed in Rio de Janeiro. Mateus, who identified as gender neutral, was reported missing by friends and family on April 29th. According to the police, the 21-year-old activist was killed by criminals in a favela north of the city on Sunday. Passarelli was last seen leaving a party after saying goodbye to his friends. Still in Brazil, a judge has denied members of the regional Mercosur group a permission to visit former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva at the police headquarters in Curitiba, where he's been held. A Mercosur Human Rights Commission filed a request to visit Lula on April 27th in order to investigate the conditions in which the former president is being held. We'll take a short break now, but join us after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. In Nicaragua, the general prosecutor has announced that a suspect has been arrested for killing journalist Ángel Eduardo Gaona during the April demonstrations. The ongoing investigation points to Brandon Christopher Lobo Taylor, who also allegedly wounded a police officer. The killing appears to have been committed with a homemade firearm.
The public prosecutor, as the victim's representative in the city of Managua, will put forward the accusation against Brandon Christopher Lobo for the charges of murder, attempted murder, and other crimes. We are also accusing Glem Abraham Slay of being an accomplice.
Carlos Alvarado will take office as the new president of Costa Rica during a ceremony at Plaza de la Democracia in San Jose. 7 presidents from the region have been invited to the inauguration. Let's hear from our correspondent, Fernando Francia, with the latest from San Jose.
It's ready for the presidential inauguration that will take place this Tuesday. Luis Guillermo Solís will hand over the presidency to Carlos Alvarado. Carolina Hidalgo, president of the Legislative Assembly, will take Alvarado's oath of office. Hidalgo was elected head of the Assembly on May 1st. Before taking oath, Alvarado will meet with members of his cabinet, and together they will go to La Plaza de la Democracia, where the ceremony is set to start at around 9 in the morning. 7 presidents were invited to take part of this inauguration, among them the Ecuadorian President Lenin Moreno and the Bolivian President Evo Morales. Later on, the new president will meet with an international delegations invited to the ceremony and also attend a concert played by local musicians. Alvarado is also expected to announce his first decrees, with which his 4-year term as the 48th president of Costa Rica will officially begin.
That was Fernando Francia from San Jose. Democratization of land, expanding education, and fighting climate change are the 3 priorities for Colombian presidential candidate Gustavo Petro, in order to bring peace and social justice to his country. In an interview with Telesur, the left-wing candidate highlighted the importance of changing the current production model to achieve a fair society. He also addressed the risk of fraud in the electoral process, but said that Colombian people understand the importance of voting. According to the latest polls, Petro and his opponent, Iván Duque, are almost neck and neck in the presidential race. The election will be held on the 27th of May.
In my opinion, in the 21st century, the great division politicians face across the world is the one caused by climate change. That divides us in 2 sides. One side is the one made up of people, forces, governments, parties, social organizations, globally or locally, that support life and are looking for a change of pattern in matters such as culture, consumption, technology, progress.
That you support.
I support them, yes. And then we have another side, the side of the economic powers, linked to oil and coal.
There has
always been electoral fraud in Colombia, and the main one, the one that happens more often, is the one linked to the purchasing of votes.
Do you think it will also happen in these elections?
Of course, there's a lot of money involved in the purchasing of votes, especially the votes of the poor people. The good thing is that nowadays people with economic needs are thinking it twice before giving their votes away, because they would prefer to use their vote to elect someone who can make a real change.
We continue in Colombia, where human rights activist and Senator Iván Cepeda, along with former politician Álvaro Leiva, have published an open letter to FARC member Jesus Santrich, asking him to end his hunger strike. They ask him to continue living to build a stronger peace. Santrich was arrested on April 9th at the request of the U.S. government for alleged drug trafficking and has been on hunger strike since then. Weeks later, he was taken to a hospital in Bogotá, where he still remains. And on the border between Ecuador and Colombia, security is tight following recent murders and kidnappings. But how are the citizens of the border town of San Lorenzo continuing to go about their daily lives? Let's listen from our correspondent, Denise Herrera.
3 months have passed since the first terrorist attack in the city of San Lorenzo on the northern border with Colombia, where citizens confirmed latest attacks and that the violence on the border have affected their daily activities.
We must not be surprised, because these problems have not come just now. Us, the people who live in the border, know that those Colombian conflicts have always been there, and they don't belong to us. It shouldn't be our problem.
Security measures have been implemented by the government as the state of emergency along the province, and the military operations have created not only the displacement of relatives, but also a lack of benefits such as medical assistance. Doctors have been ordered to leave the area by the authorities.
Instead of investing in armed force, they should invest in health and development, because these people are abandoned.
Citizens continue their activity despite the tense situation on the border. Although they have to live under military controls, they will not leave their homes. They will also continue to make a call for return to normality in a place where violence and insecurity has become part of their daily lives.
The state forgot about us, the citizens, the ones who suffer the consequences.
For San Lorenzo citizens, instability is part of their daily lives, as well as being in the middle of a conflict in which they are the main victims. However, authorities have pointed to the leader of Oliver Sinisterra armed group, alias Guacho, as a person responsible for at least 10 attacks on the border in the past few months. The murders of the 3 journalists of the Comercio newspaper, the murders of the 4 militaries, and the recent kidnapping of a couple who are still missing. Denise Herrera, Telesur, Quito, Ecuador.
And now to the Caribbean, where CARICOM foreign ministers are meeting in Bahamas for the second day to discuss Brexit and other issues affecting the region. Speaking at the opening on Monday, CARICOM Secretary General Irwin LaRocque urged member states to be more united than ever. He noted that they all stood together for the Windrush scandal and they were able to raise awareness and hopefully see improvement in the lives of UK citizens. The meeting will also cover EU blacklisting, transnational crime, and the threat of violent extremism. Police in Suriname have detained 13 suspects accused of killing at least 16 Guyanese fishermen last month. Dozens of others are being questioned still. It is one of the deadliest pirate attacks off the Atlantic coast in recent times. On April 27, 4 boats with over 20 fishermen were attacked by pirates off Suriname. Only 5 fishermen escaped and survived the attack. They recalled horrific details of how the pirates beat them, attacked them with machetes, and threw some of the bodies overboard. We'll take one last short break, but join us after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has met with Chinese Premier Xi Jinping in Dalian, China. It is the second meeting between them in less than 2 months. Both leaders are seeking better bilateral relations and to improve strategic communications. The talks come at a crucial time when the Korean peninsula is undergoing big changes after Kim agreed to denuclearize North Korea. U.S. President Donald Trump has also planned a summit with Kim Jong-un, although the date has not yet been revealed. And after a month of protest in Armenia, the country now has a prime minister. Here's more on that story and other ones making headlines around the world.
Armenia's
parliament has elected opposition leader Nikol Pashinyan as the new prime minister. Pashinyan has led anti-government rallies across the country since last month. The appointment comes 2 weeks after long-term politician Sal Sargsyan resigned following anti-government demonstrations. Armenia has been without a leader since April 23rd, and thousands of people have been on the streets protesting.
Dear colleagues, I thank you for this vote and for your stance. I only want to say the following. I will serve to the people of the Republic of Armenia. I will serve to the Republic of Armenia. Thank you.
Hundreds of people have gathered outside the Hungarian parliament to protest against the election of Viktor Orbán as the prime minister for the third term. Orbán won re-election last month after his anti-immigration campaign message secured a strong majority among voters. He won 133 of 199 seats in the parliament, which enables him to pass laws unopposed. Protesters accuse him of removing democratic checks and balances and is steering the country away from the European mainstream. Italy's coalition-building talks have failed 2 months after the general elections. This leaves the country with 2 options: either face fresh elections or have a neutral caretaker government until the end of the year. This follows the success of the populist Five-Star movement, which won the 30% of the vote but could not agree on joining forces either with the right-wing alliance of Forza Italia and the League or with the center-left Democratic Party.
And with that roundup, we come to the end of this news brief. But as you know, there's so many other stories. You can find them on our website at telesurtv.net/English. And you can also follow us on social media on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.